Hi friends, I'm Jeff E.G. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're a regular viewer, welcome back. It occurred to me, and it should have been obvious, that if you're looking to build your sound library, you could either go with synths or sample packs. Whether you're a beginner or a musician or a producer of hip-hop, sample packs could be a really effective way to build your sound sources. And if they are the inspiration for the songs that you write, there's different ways you can go about it. Where sampling used to be just in the domain of hip-hop, house, and EDM, it's now branched into pretty much every type of music. So even if you're a singer-songwriter or you do more traditional indie and rock music, you're going to use samples for drum beats, bass parts, some melodic key parts, and just effects to build out your music. How this caught my attention is a vendor named Samples from Mars came out with a sale where you could buy all their cumulative sample packs, 74 of them, for $59. It was a limited time. I'm not sure the sale is still on anymore. But what you're getting there is the best of sample packs at a very low price. It's over 50 gigabytes of data, so if you're looking to build your sample library, this was a good way to do it. And what isn't obvious is that you're not just getting raw samples, but these are curated into relevant theme packs. And it's ready to go for certain samplers. Ableton, Logic, Contact from Native Instruments, those things have already been defined and they're easy to open and use right away. For many who are not well versed in samples and sample packs, it might not be obvious what you're getting here.
I don't understand.
Neither do I, actually.
Now, an alternative might be to download virtual synthesizers, many of which you can get for free and some that are available at a low cost. You would get hundreds, if not thousands, of presets, and you would have the ability then to design and morph your own sounds if you're into sound design. So on the one hand, you've got sample packs, and on the other side, you've got synthesizers. That's when I realized the topic of this video is synths or samples. I realize there's a contingency of old school musicians, maybe guitar players, drummers, who are not that familiar with sampling, sample packs, and even virtual synths. There is this view that the sounds from keyboards emanate from physical hardware that we used to call keyboard synthesizers. For many musicians and producers today, those keyboards are so expensive, they're out of reach for the average person. And that's why virtual synthesizers, downloading software that emulates those vintage synthesizers, is the more budget-friendly way to go. There are companies like Arturia and Native Instruments that bundle up many synths, and you can pay for and download those. There are also many free virtual synths that are excellent quality, and they tend to dominate the production environment today. And there are some people who see sampling as new, but really it's been around quite a long time. Back in the 90s, Roland, Korg, and Yamaha started incorporating sampled sounds into their keyboard synthesizers, and they called those romplers and samplers. When you played back sounds, you were not playing back synthesized artificial sounds, you were playing back recordings of original instruments. So it's been around a while and it's not new. And how this comes into play is that when you download a sample pack, you can take any sample, drag it into your DAW, and turn that into a sampled instrument. It's fairly easy to do.
Well, the first thing you got to know is you can make a sampled instrument out of any sample. I have a Logic project I just opened. I'm just going to grab any sample, looking through my library of all the samples from Mars, and I come across this sound, and I can just drag that over into Logic, add it to Quick Sampler, and doesn't matter what key I play, it's going to adjust the pitch based on the key I play on my MIDI controller. So I've got a sampled instrument instantly with just one sample. You could select a bunch of these, drag them over, and one of the options will be a chromatic map. See that? Chromatic map. And that's going to create a multi-sample instrument where all of those samples have been assigned to keys. You'll see down here, you can see the name of the file that's being played. just take a little more unusual example. I have a sample that's called pop. It's just a single pop. I drag that in, add it to Quick Sampler. I need to trim this a little bit. It's got a long lead time on it. Shorten the length of the sample. Maybe get this a little bit closer. Okay. That's good. And I can play any key. Or I can play a chord. So I've created a sample instrument with nothing more than a sample called pop.
There are different ways you can accumulate a pretty large sample library. First, most vendors offer a free sample pack as a trial, and you can download those off the internet and accumulate quite an arsenal. The next level is really paid for sample packs. They're often curated into a single theme at a small price tag. You download those and own those samples. The third thing you can do is subscribe to a sample library that's online, like LoopCloud or Splice, which are both very popular. That gives you access to 4 million plus samples and some tools for curating and managing those as packs or creating your own favorites. The last option is supplied by some of the major vendors. In the Native Instruments world, what they have are called expansions. Originally, they were designed for the Maschine devices, but you can use all the contents of those expansions in your DAW, whether you're using Ableton, Logic, Studio One, or anything else. You buy them individually, although a certain number of expansions are included if you buy the complete bundle. In my case, I've tried all three. I have quite an arsenal of accumulated free samples. It's more than 500 gigabytes in size and well over 100,000 samples. I manage those in a couple of ways. I use the ADSR Sample Manager, which is free, and I also use the Loop browser built into Logic. On top of that, I do pay for a couple subscriptions. I have LoopCloud, and I like it quite a bit, and I also have Amplify Sounds, which are curated packs that I download every week or every month for new inspiration and new sounds. I also have Native Instruments Complete 14, and along with that came quite a number of expansions. At first, I wasn't sure how to use those expansions because they contain drum kits for battery, presets for massive synth and some of the other synths that are built into the bundle, as well as hundreds of samples. With all those sources of samples and loops, it can be pretty overwhelming at times. Fortunately, no matter what vendor you pick samples from, they all come tagged in a uniform way. So searching for the sounds that you're looking for is pretty easy. Switch over to virtual synths, and it's a little bit more complex. I also have dozens of synthesizers, mostly virtual synths, and each one comes with hundreds, if not thousands, of presets. But those presets are specific to the vendor that provides the synth. The advantage of the synthesizers is that you're creating sounds and you can tweak and morph those sounds quite a bit. You can do this with sampling as well by adding modulation and effects, but in terms of creating the source sound, in a synthesizer you're usually starting with oscillators or different methods of creating the sound source. I'll qualify that in explaining that a lot of modern synths now use samples as a potential source. So the line between sampler and synth is getting a bit foggy. There's a technique for granular synthesis that allows you to start with any sample as a source, take bits and pieces of that sample, morph it, tweak it, add modulation and effects, and turn that into a brand new sound. Now let's just take a quick look at what you get from the Samples from Mars bundle.
Well, like a lot of sample packs of virtual instruments, when you sign up, you'll download a bunch of zip files into your download directory. And then you should create a folder. I created one called Samples from Mars. I put all the content of those zip files into my Samples from Mars folder. You'll see that it's organized into folders or directories. There is an Ableton one, and this contains the instrument, the sample instrument for Ableton. And similarly, if you have Battery or FL Studio, or in my case I use Logic, I will find the sample instruments in here. So you'll see there's an EXS file for every instrument they're delivering, and they're delivering quite a few. So if I look at kits file, now if you don't know how to use those, you can go into this documents folder and you'll find installation instructions, sample instruments in your DAW, which is really helpful. The actual samples are stored down here in the WAV file directory. See, it's organized here into individual hits or kits. These are the actual sample files that are used in that kit. Okay, and that's just one pack. And if you want to listen to the WAV files individually, you definitely can. I mean, you can treat this just like a normal sample library. Here's what it looks like in Logic. I've added the sample instrument to a track, and from this menu, I can open up all kinds of kits from that sample. Here's the SK1 kit. And you'll see the mapping and how it's laid out. And they've done all the heavy lifting for you. Let's say I take this 101 drums kit. Bunch of different effects. You can see that each sample has already been assigned to a key chromatically, so it's really easy to use. They've done all the heavy lifting for you, which is really nice.
My thoughts are that for $59, this is a heck of a deal. Partially because they've already done the heavy lifting of organizing those samples into samplers that are common in most DAWs. Also, you have to consider the alternative. If you were to buy hardware synths to produce similar sounds, it would cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. So for $59, what you're getting from Samples from Mars is pretty effective in terms of building your sound library. Now, if you're budget conscious, or let's just say cheap, like me, there's a couple of strategies that I recommend for getting started in this area. Obviously, the Sample from Mars bundle for $59 is a good way to start building your sample library. The next thing you might want to do is download free samples from some of the major vendors. Here's a look at where I got a lot of the samples that are in my free sample library.
Before you start looking at third-party sources for samples and loops, if you have Logic or GarageBand, make sure you download all the content Apple provides, because Apple has a great assortment of loops and samples for you to start with. I think there's over 72 gigabytes. I've got loops from some of these vendors for free. Cinmatics has a lot, Big Fish Audio, Black Octopus, Calum Audio, you may not have heard of them, but they have some unique ones. Echo Soundworks, Ghost Hack, Incognito Samples, MGF Audio Samples. There's a bunch of different packs you can look at from them. VST Buzz, there's all kinds you can download. Synthwave Samples. And one of the best is Music Radar Magazine, which has an article. You could just do a search for this, and they have over 88,000 samples that you can download for free.
Once you've started to build that library and you've been browsing through the samples, you may say, what's the next step? I would recommend an online sample library service like Splice or LoopCloud. I like LoopCloud because there's a lot of free perks. Also, their plugin works particularly well with most DAWs. I like the idea that within your composition, you can just add the LoopCloud plugin, and it has certain editing features that I don't see from other providers. It has an 8-track recorder built into it, as well as effects. You can change the key, the tempo, the BPM for a particular sample, and you can do all that browsing before you commit to buying or downloading those samples. The parent company of LoopCloud also owns Plugin Boutique. So every month they come out with a free plugin, and that's a nice little perk. There are beat makers, singer-songwriters, and musicians that buy into the Native Instruments complete bundles. You might just have, say, Complete 14 Standard Edition, but it comes delivered with a bunch of expansions. And a lot of people really don't know how to use those expansions or what's included in them.
One way to browse all of those expansions is with the Maschine 2 software that comes from Native Instruments. If you buy a Maschine device, you automatically get this software included, and it's kind of a groovebox/DAW. So you can see here on the left, there is a list of all the expansions that I currently own. And then if you were to dive into one, there are some delivered projects. And the projects are kind of a good way to just see what some of the sounds are. Open a project. Here you got drums, some melodics, and a bass part. And you can browse through all the content. So here in Burrow Chops, here's a list of all the drum kits that are delivered. You can open up any one of those kits. And sometimes there's samples, instrument presets, and effects. So it can be quite extensive. The Maschine 2 software isn't necessary. You can actually pull all of this content into your DAW if you've got Logic or Ableton. But I've always found that this environment is one of the easy ways to browse through of all the patterns and leads that are already there.
The advantage of a lot of these curated packs, whether it's from Native Instruments or another vendor, is that the vendor's done a lot of work to put together samples, kits, beats, bass parts, and melodic parts that follow a consistent theme. So for a lot of producers, this is an easier way to get going, to be inspired, and to create new music without worrying about the overwhelming number of samples and sound sources that are available to them. I get it. Although personally, I've always enjoyed the creativity of browsing through hundreds of samples to find something that gives me inspiration. So if you're looking to expand or build your sound library, whether it's going down the road of virtual synths or samples, I can give you a good starting point. First, there are free virtual synths that I would recommend. Here's my list.
There are hundreds of virtual synths, and I can't go through them all, and there's lots of resources out there that will list all of them for you, but here's some of the ones I think you gotta get. Vital is excellent, XT Surge, top notch, Zebralet by Yuhi, or any of the Yuhi synths that are free, definitely worth getting. Odin 2.3, Dext is a DX7 clone, gotta have it, it's one of the oldest ones around. OBXD, another one you just gotta have.
Jumping into the paid category of synthesizers, there are certain market leaders. I would recommend you take a look at those, the pricing, and decide whether it's worth investing in those. Does that take you a lot further than the free ones that I mentioned? I started this whole topic around synths versus samples. I've highlighted some of the differences between the two, but I'll admit the line between the two is blurred, and in most cases, people have both. I hope this video is a bit of a tutorial and it's helpful, sort of setting the landscape and adding some perspective. Always best to know your options before you spend some money. If you like this video, click on the like button, consider subscribing to the channel, and hit the notification bell to find out when I'm releasing new videos.